Hi, thank you, Yaz. This is Kat Meyer. As Yaz mentioned, I'm the community manager and one of the 2 conference chairs for Tools of Change, which is the POC practice area. And thank you, everybody, for joining today. We're really, really excited to have Pilar Wyman here. Pilar is going to be speaking all about metadata and opening up the index. And I know there's a lot happening in this area right now, so I'm going to let her get started in just a second. But I also wanted to mention that we are in the heat of planning for TOC, our big event in New York in February. And we have our early bird discount extended due to the storm that people were a bit preoccupied with past few weeks. So if you want to sign up, you can still take advantage of our best pricing until November 15th. We're going to have some incredible speakers and really fun stuff going on. And speaking of incredible speakers, Pilar will be at TOC in New York as well. Please check out, that's at toccon.com to find information about that event. And if you go to toc.o'reilly.com, you can find out about all the other stuff that we've got going on, from webcasts to podcasts to our mini TOCs and plenty of other stuff. So please join us there as part of the community. Pilar, I'm going to turn it over to you now, so go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you, Kat. That was a very generous introduction. And I must say I'm really honored to be part of the whole program here with the webcasting and for the upcoming TOC event. And this is my first webcast, which I'm really excited about. Looking forward to seeing how it goes, and also hoping you guys will be patient if it takes me a second to figure out where to push a button or which one. But let's get going with this. As you said, Kat, we're going to be talking about new paths for reusing metadata, for reusing indexes as content metadata for discovery and recommendations and monetization. Some of you may have heard already at previous talks I've given. Some of you I know are already some indexers out there and might be familiar, so I do look forward to your questions as we go so that I can help fine-tune this for you as best to my ability. But the main key point I want to get across is that indexes, those wonderfully crafted, already written troves of data, are one of the most detailed metadata sets available for your content. And they can and should be used to search, to recommend, to explore, and create buyers for your publications. They're not just for stagnant straight reading anymore. But briefly, an overview of what we're going to talk about today. Some of this was set up with Jan Wright, who was the original speaker, and then I came in, so I'm working somewhat with somebody else's outline here, but I'm pretty excited about it. We're going to start out with some baseline metadata, semantic markup, controlled vocabularies, and then getting into displaying mashups of multiple indexes, how they can be used online. I've got a demo I'm going to play for you, hopefully, and a little bit on how to incorporate social input, resources, and questions and stuff like that. So let's see, I lost my mouse, but then we can go on to the next slide. All right, so baseline metadata. Simply put, and this is the definition that I'm going to use, metadata is data about data. It's any information that tells you about something else, that tells you about what is coming. That, in my view, is metadata. We can get into a conversation about data, but really we're talking about codified information, and when it's meta, it's about something else. So for the purposes of this presentation, for me today, I'm talking about metadata as data or information about something else. The key, of course, is that good metadata drives sales. And at the Frankfurt Book Fair last month, metadata was number 3 on the top 10 list of buzzwords. So we're not the only ones talking about it, and you're probably all wondering, what is this stuff about? Baseline metadata, this is something that many of you may well recognize, and I don't mean so much the picture on the right as I do that number. And I'm shamelessly stealing this idea and this slide, or the concept for this slide, from Vala Valiki of Small Demons, who says, let me start with a very standard approach to book metadata. This is an example. It's an ISBN 13, an International Standard Book Number, 13-digit identifier for a book. ISBN 10 was developed by the International Standard Organization in 1970. There's a 9-digit version of the code in the United Kingdom, and then we've had this 13-digit code since 2007. There's a different version that's used for magazines and periodicals. That's one basic chunk of metadata for a book. There are some similar proposals that I also want to describe. For example, we heard in Frankfurt last month a proposal for a version of baseline metadata for individuals, the ISNI, International Standard Name Identifier, a proposal for public individuals to have your own unique number. This too was put out by the ISO on March 15th, earlier this year, to identify the public identities of parties. But another example, too, are the book industry study group subject codes, industry standards used in Onyx code. These are the types of codes that booksellers use for cataloging, for getting out for books to sale. As the National Book Network says, for example, the generic code for cooking, it's CKB and then a whole slew of zeros. But you can also have variations where you play around with the numbers and you get into types of cooking. All of this is to help buyers and sellers locate your title. So these are very specific types of metadata. With V for Vendetta, that number you see there on the screen identifies a very specific book, a very specific body of work. And it goes with that cover image you see as well, which is the first edition as released in paperback by Warner Books and DC Comics, May 1st, 1990, written by Alan Moore and drawn by David Lloyd. This is not the ISBN for the Kindle edition or any other later edition or any movie version or anything like that. Each of them has their own different and unique number. And if either of the authors have an ISNI number, that too would be uniquely theirs. At the same time, I should point out there is wild inconsistency between different editions of the same work. Penguin has 10 editions, for example, of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Random House has 8. The summary and the text excerpts and the tailored catalog copy varies wildly between them. So we definitely need some control and some consistency going on as we review and work with metadata. Now some metadata, however, such as those BISG or the Library of Congress or the Dewey Decimal System codes, are general. And as specific as the codes may look, down to 6 digits or other levels of specificity, as you saw previously, or with the Dewey Decimal codes, all these subject codes serve to generally tell you what a book is about. They're information about that book and about its content, and they're examples of metadata that thinks about a book or a work as a product. But how else might you catalog or code V for Vendetta? Graphic novel, dystopia, Guy Fawkes, revolution, anonymous. How you code or tag it directs how the content is going to be seen or accessed. What I've mentioned so far has dealt with sort of the very superficial aspects, the author, the title, how it was printed or published, not really getting into the meat of it. Then when you start looking at the meat of it, then you start affecting how the book can be found or discovered in a more meaningful way. And indeed, there are many, many cataloging systems and metadata standards, and we could go off talking about Dewey Decimal and alternative systems. But we're not going to do that yet, or today. I want you to think of metadata as a type of mask. perhaps even an X-ray or an inverse or an inverted mask. The metadata gives you a filtered or condensed or masked view of what is coming, of what lies beyond. This X-ray or inverse mask can be created thematically, via facets, via wireframes or scaffolding, or aspects of dimensional modeling. All of these systems, these metadata systems I have already mentioned, each of them relies on certain themes or facets or dimensions. Each of them looks at certain ones and chooses those to be the way it's going to set up its little naming system. It's all about what you want the public to know about your content. That's what you reveal through the metadata, and that's what you reveal through the mask. And this is what we rely on electronically. This is what we reveal, electronically when we embed metadata into our work. We're choosing how it will be seen to the public in a filtered way. Semantic markup and metadata tags, also known as semantic HTML, is a way to embed those bits of metadata code to help define the style of a document. Some of these I'm sure you guys are going to be familiar with. Anybody who's got any technical experience recognizes these bits of code. But they don't speak to the structure of a document. These bits of code do help define the structure of a document. And when you're defining a document, the semantics of the page give you information about the data that then allows computers and others to access and use that data, rather than just display it. And this then leads to the metadata tags, which also are included with the document, as with a book. These are the tags that include description and help the search engines and others understand what the website or document they go with are about. All of these are usually hidden in the text. They're not usually seen by the casual or the typical reader. And I'm sure you guys are all familiar with this. But they definitely, and they do affect how the text are found, whether they're searched for by search engines or other readers. Keyword tags, not so much now, although they still are very much for many. Hashtags are a lot like meta tags and metadata tags. They're not as hidden, though, and they can be very useful for searching. And boy, can they be inconsistent. They can definitely affect how information is found or not. But as they are a folksonomy written by the general public, including everybody and their uncle, consistency is typically lacking. So we do need vocabulary control, especially across multiple platforms or publications. It's just incredibly important to find all the information that you're looking for a certain topic, and you will not do that if you don't have consistent tagging or quality control going on. One way to do that, to master that consistency and that need for quality control, is by putting the metadata together as an index. At that point, you can see more the whole, that is, all the instances of when some metadata has been used and its different variations, as well as the details. And you can control for quality. So what do I mean by displaying metadata together or as an index? And yes, there was a little bit of self-censorship on this slide. There's just so much metadata out there. The sheer number of metadata standards in the cultural heritage sector, for example, is overwhelming, and their interrelationships further complicate the situation. That image you see on the quote I just read is by Jen Riley. The number of control vocabularies even or vocabulary spaces can also be overwhelming. Oh, whoops, I hit the wrong button. So here's what I'm referring to as an A to Z display of metadata, or it's an excerpt from one. And yes, it's simply an index. It's an A to Z display of metadata for a very specific set of content. And it can be a great way to control for consistency and quality. The index, in fact, is an example of when another person has already gone through and analyzed and put in the appropriate terms, concepts, keywords, explaining what something else is about. And they can be a great source of metadata. You don't have to worry about recreating the wheel or hiring someone to select keywords or asking the author to put in keywords. It's already been done in the index. The headings, the subheadings, those lines of text you see in the box on the right, these I would like you to think of as tags to identify the aboutness of the text they go with. So each of those clickable page numbers, or presumably clickable, would take you to the information that tag goes with. And it's not just a simple keyword. There's actually some relationships going on in the way they're laid out. You can see, for example, that first set of page numbers at the very top, or the line 2, I guess, is not only about tandem mass spectrometry, but about using that for genetic testing. Now, to get all that across with words or as metadata can be difficult. And if you were just doing a search for tandem mass spectrometry and you just got a string of numbers, you would not know that one of them had some more specific information going on, namely genetic testing. So really, the page numbers are irrelevant. They're just markers to take you to the text that these meta tags, these lines of text in the heading, in the index go to. Locators can be seen or displayed when they're page numbers, or they can be hidden and available behind the text for click through. That's the beauty of using the index. And I'm going to get back into this a little bit more. I'm usually taking questions as I go, so I feel the urge to ask you all to put in any questions, but I don't think there have been any yet. As I look at this index excerpt, it screams out to me how much metadata is available right there just from those few lines. The Toulouse-Lautrec example in particular. Granted, the name may not be complete, but you would not know that those 3 locations, for example, were about his alcohol abuse if you had just been doing a straight search for his name. But using the index has given you the advantage of some analysis. It's a more specified type of metadata, but it's so rich. All right. The beauty of the screen-based index is, yes, they are as important as search or full-text search. The index is a crucial piece of accessibility into nonfiction content. It's really a navigational tool. And for whatever reason, we haven't been thinking of indexes as navigational tools, to use some of the modern vernacular, when in fact that's very much what they are. They are not simply a chapter at the end of the book or another supplement that's been written to go along with it to flip at maybe when you are bored or when you need to look at one specific thing. They really are a way to get you around some information and around the text. Some have, unfortunately, forgotten about it in the move to the on-screen world, especially with regard to digital books, with all the self-publishing. We have forgotten about this extremely useful tool, especially with regards to nonfiction text. Navigation is absolutely critical. We have heard informal feedback already that reading electronically, especially with eBooks, is fine for fiction. But for nonfiction, better navigation, better memory, and recognition aids are needed to help readers place themselves in that linear stream of information, which actually really is nonlinear, and then to get back to that information and reread it. I don't want to go through and just read this slide. I'm going to trust that you all can read it or have been reading it. Some of these points I've already mentioned as I've been talking. Perhaps one of the most important things I want to draw your attention to right now is the next to last bullet on this slide. The metadata and the aboutness that the index provides you is at a very specific level. In some cases, as we saw on the previous slide, it's for a range of pages, in other words, for a large chunk of information. But it can also be for a very specific small chunk of information. So these screen-based or electronic indexes, the links and the way they work have to be very, very accurate, not only with regards to the precision of the metadata, in other words, the written content of the indexes, but also with regards to the electronic linking that they provide. It's got to be to the very precise bits of information that they go with. Otherwise, there's not much point to them. All of these aspects of the indexes, when they're used this way and written well with an idea that they are, in fact, a source of metadata and navigational tool, they become, in fact, a sales tool. But it doesn't work if you just try to mimic a paper interface. That does not work well on screen. It's been very frustrating for professional indexers watching digital books develop. As for many of us, we thought we'd already conquered many of these challenges in technical documentation. Indexes in on-screen environments, unfortunately, don't always work well. But they have in the past, or certain things have that we just need to call back into question. Many of the features that we recommend for eBook indexes come from ones that have worked well for software help systems. We've been searching and tagging information digitally already for over 40 years. The digital environment is just another interface, as is paper. So moving paper-like indexes on screen, we've got to take advantage of that digital usability and on-screen real estate. But doing, a print page on-screen model of a PDF file doesn't exactly do the job. So I mentioned help. Here's an example of a help screen of the type I'm referring to. This is taken from Syndex, which is a piece of indexing software. Many of you have probably seen similar help menus in previous and other books. What you've got over on the left is essentially the index for that book, for that manual. But what happens is you're not seeing the page numbers. And when you do click on something, as you move through that help menu, you see a little preview of the text it goes with on the right. In other words, it's linked. In other words, what you see on the left is very, very specific metadata telling you about the text that lies ahead, and so that you don't have to go reading the whole thing for yourself. There are some other features, too, of these help systems that we want to incorporate into indexes. Let me point out and ask if you remember type ahead or the scrolling. Those certainly could work with indexes as well and make them into a really viable navigational tool. You can see the tabs at the top of the screen of that, in that screenshot there, whether you're going to look at contents, index, or search. Vizio Corporation in the 90s did some usability tests, and they learned that people found better information using index rather than the find or the search. But the users themselves did not know which one they were using when. They didn't know they were using find and when they were using the index. So we're recommending that you combine search and find into one search feature. Get that metadata right there from the index into search. This may mean including the index in a preliminary e-reader interface or other search tools. But what you're doing then is providing the context of that metadata right away for your readers. In online help, we added context by showing that list of topic titles that you could leap to or leap around in, or immediately showing the whole topic with links to additional information. That context is important. So the beauty here is you've got that metadata, but you can also see all its relations and what's going along with it as well. Now, some may think that indexes give too much data, that they give more information than readers want or read. You know, that you might think you need to filter out some stuff to get to the real metadata. But we humans, we need repetition and we need redundancy. The index, with its perhaps overabundance and rich metadata, it's actually a conversation with the reader. It's a helping hand to find concepts that can be lost or finding the right words for concepts. But really, when it comes to sales, it's that conversation that's key. Once that, especially with regards to a digital book, once that book is in their hands, you've lost a chance to talk with them. But that's where the index comes in, because there with the index, that conversation can continue between the publisher or the author and another reader and the incoming reader to say, here's what's available to you and where it is. And, oh, you can't find it quite where you want? Look over here. But there's also this over here. It's a wonderful way they can get back and forth and feel an ongoing connection. The index offers multiple ways to get to the content. That's the point of the redundancy. I had a conversation with an author, I think it was last week. This is a classic one we share at the indexing conferences. You already used the word farming. Why do we need to say agriculture as well? Well, because I don't know exactly how my reader is going to come at the text. We need to provide the different ways in. Sure, some of those extra posts may well not be appropriate for your text, but you definitely want to provide multiple ways in, multiple points of access. It's not too much metadata. It's actually more helpful to have that redundancy than not. It's also, another way to think of it is breadcrumbs. Is another way to get around. You're allowing then, especially if you've got the index as part of the search, for every word and total recall. You've also got that table of contents, and the index is the safety net, providing many access points to the text just as a good index does. And really, it's all just this huge, wonderful cushion of metadata. Yes, redundancy is the antidote to confusion. Now, I want to share with you some examples of how indexes are used as metadata. I was hoping to be able to share with you some screenshots from this project that's in development. Unfortunately, they are still without power. Their headquarters are up in Brooklyn. Anyway, the American Geriatrics Society is developing an online portal for geriatrics care, and essentially it's going to be a repository of references and materials on geriatrics that doctors and other users can use to create their own customized libraries and customized publications. This has been happening a lot in publishing. And the way we're building it, the search aspect, is we're going to map subject categories from book chapters for the initial searching. Subject categories will be taken directly from the original indexing. In other words, the indexes have been written for all these works. They're pretty darn good. I've written most of them. Shameless plug here. So the thought was, we don't need to recreate this stuff. There's no reason to go in and have somebody else put in keywords. We've got the data already in the indexes. So we're going to take, for example, subject headings from within the chapter level of the books and use those for building the frames of the search. These subject categories are what readers will then use to help build their text for purchase. Upon purchase, they will then get the whole index, including headings and subheadings for all the content within those purchased chapters. So you have levels of metadata within the index. You don't need to release it or use all of it at once. For example, we're going to look at the as I mentioned, the chapter headings and cull just that content from the index for the first layer of search, and then let the users have the rest of it as well. That's just one example of a way to use index metadata. We don't need to retag the content. It's already been done. Why recreate the wheel? We're working first with legacy print publications. Since the indexing wasn't embedded, we're going to have to go back in to make those links. There's lots of ways to do that. Future publications that go straight to digital will have a slightly different workflow. And I am sorry that I couldn't provide you more about those examples right now. Some other examples are from Kevin Broccoli and his team of people at BIM Indexing. He's been doing or providing what he calls precision indexed search for intranets, where even subheadings, those subsidiary lines in an index, can be used for metadata. And those lines, those headings, those concepts from the index are tagged into the documents, if not already there, into the company repository, much the way I just described for this collection of books and other reading materials. For example, if you search on the word cache, you'll get all the hits from the index. They've modified the entries a little bit for readability so that you can fully see the relationships in addition to the keyword and the main heading meta tags. So this is an example of the indexes were written once, then you come back in, do a little bit of quality review, and can really make that available as a source of metadata. The index or the full master collection of metadata can also be presented as a browsable index in addition to being included in search. You don't want to lose those wonderful benefits of serendipity that come with being able to look at an index. As Ben says, if you don't have a lot of information on your intranet or website, or if it doesn't really matter, they suggest you use a free search engine, such as Google or PicoSearch. But if you manage intranet content for a medical institution, a financial services company, a law firm, or another company with information of great importance, then you definitely are going to want to use index metadata. And as Intranet Design magazine says, as company intranets grow, it becomes increasingly difficult to find the exact information that an intranet user may be looking for. Companies have traditionally used search engines to locate information on their intranets, but many are finding that search engines, even the newer so-called intelligent ones, they're just not enough. For example, perhaps you're looking up information on a particular subject, you type the word into the search engine interface, you click go, within seconds you have a list of retrieved documents, but there's probably 87 of them. Little indication is given to you as to which one might be the one you need. You can click on some of the entries with the hopes that the needed information will be within the first few documents, or you can spend hours combing. The solution, of course, is an index with main headings and subcategories to instantly help the user narrow down their search and figure out which specific documents in particular they need. And the interface of an index is really quite familiar to everyone. They've been in the back of reference books and trade books since the beginning of print, so you're not asking them to work with something new. And then as Brian O'Leary said in book A Futurist Manifesto, Digital Abundance is pushing publishers to create much more than title-level metadata. To manage abundance, publishers and their agents can and do use blunt instruments like verticals or more elegant tools like search engines. But when it comes to discovery, access, and utility, nothing substitutes for authorial and editorial judgment, as evidenced in the structural and contextual tags applied to our content. I don't mean to be repeating myself so much, but sometimes getting the message across can, gee, that's redundancy, right? Okay, let's get into some fun things here. Some other things that Broccoli has been doing, and well, many people have done this actually, but he's got a fun way of referring to it, which is as index mashups. Take a bunch of indexes and put them together, and you've got a mashup. You know, you take the indexes in the back of a book, you mix them with indexes from other books, And then you throw in some indexes of other things as well. And you can have a very, very useful tool for finding information. And then he says, if you've ever thought it stinks to buy a book before really knowing what's in it, you'll like what we've done with the index of Seth Godin's Poke the Box. Instead of just page numbers, you'll find the actual paragraphs of content that the index entries refer to. Sound familiar? That's like the business with the help menu where you could see what was going to come. Of course, the index is just a navigational tool. The metadata tells you what it's about, and then you can even see a little snippet of it as well. Look inside or downloading a sample chapter isn't always enough. So he's got this index mashup online of 5 books by Seth Godin. They're, essentially, it's a cumulative index for Linchpin, All Marketers Are Liars, Purple Cow, The Dip, and Tribes. I've included here a sample index excerpt from the Innovation heading. Entries happen to be from 2 of the 5 Godin books. Cross-references take you to other places in the index. Notice how they've got that line under them to indicate that they're links. It would be cool if the other locators, in other words, the text in the hard brackets and the page numbers or the numbers after them, took you right into the books as well, or to where you could buy them if you don't have them. So this is essentially just a marketing tool at this point for the books themselves. But what I've got is a demo showing you what that could even look like as well. But I have to get that set up, which is going to take me a second or two. So what I've got is an index mashup showing what using the metadata from an index can do for discovery and monetization. I have an index that covers several publications from the American Society for Indexing. In other words, the entries have been merged together into one cumulative index, much like we saw from Kevin Broccoli's of BIM indexing. So what you're looking at now on your screen, I think you guys can see it. Whoops. Wait a minute, I just hit the wrong thing. Okay, here we go. I'm going to take you first. Let's go see if we can look at embedded indexing, which is going to be really important. And let's go look at software tools, which will be the holy grail for embedded indexing. And what we were taken right to is an example of the text that goes with the index entry and the book that's available in. If we don't already have that book, we can just click on here and buy it. And we're taken right to the publisher's page. In other words, a link outside of the index where we can go and buy that book. Let's go look at another example. I'm going to take you to starting a business. We've got startup costs and consideration nearby. These are other potential topics in the book with some specification given by subheadings, in other words, multiple layers of metadata. Let's go look at one. This one is in italics. So it indicates it may well be a book because it's formatted that way. And sure enough, it is. It's a book, and it's been discussed in this book, Marketing Your Indexing Services Again. In other words, we've got concepts as well as titles listed in indexes. Multiple types of data are available there. Again, another way that I could buy the book if I want to. And again, we're taken to the publisher's page for that book, even though we've been looking at an index separately. Now I want to take you, since we've been talking about books, let's go look at references, and let's look at places where books or resources have been talked about. They've been talked about a lot in this collection of books. They've been talked about in 4 different books. And I want to see if we've got some other titles available online. In other words, you can see a lot. There's a lot of different ways to present this and let the index take you someplace else. Let's go look at these other titles. We've got a couple cross-references here, one to other titles available online, one to a specific heading in the index. Let's go see what this other titles available online is. Where I've taken you, where the index has allowed you to go, is to the publisher's sales page, in case they might want some additional or other titles besides the one that they're looking at. Whereas if we went to this specific heading within the text, we could see where the discussions of style guidelines are. We see there's a discussion of APA, style guidelines for specific types of books, and there's also a reference to another specific book. Not one that this publisher publishes, but there's still mention and discussion of it as it comes up typically in this industry. We could, if we're on friendly terms, maybe even link to them as well. Not that we would have to, but we could, maybe just to be nice. I want to go back to embedded indexing. I want to show you how we can build our own book using the index as a way to guide and assist the reader in finding the content they want. I'm going to go this time, I'm going to click on the main heading here and see what's available. And I see that there are general discussions of embedded indexing in 3 books in a bunch of different places. As an indexer, I think I might even want more information telling me what these different links are for, but be that as it may, we called it here in this little demo, Create Scrapbook. Of course, you can call it whatever you want, but the key thing to note here is you're using the index as a way to help the user or the audience, your reader, to potentially create their own version of a book. What we've done is then given you a way to use those locators to build a customized text straight from there. Just one way that the index can be used for monetization. A couple other things I want to show you is how we can certainly add our own notes, annotations, tags, etc. to this very index. This is, let's say it's on your own digital reader. Here is where you can see where this information is, what this entry would be taking you to, what the metadata goes with, and maybe you want to add your own comments. You certainly could. You could do all sorts of things with it if you want. There's no reason not to include that type of technology here within the index as well. Now, of course, I told you we've been looking at a collection of indexes. What if I want to look at the metadata set for just one book? I can specify which index, which book I want to be looking at. So if for example, let's say I just want to do marketing. Then notice how the content I was looking at, the set of metadata changed the minute I did that. So anyway, there's certainly, you can do that anytime you want and make the index work with you as well. I want to get back into, I'm getting a little bit concerned about time, so I want to get back into some of our other recommendations about indexes and for how you can use that set of metadata. So I need to turn off this screen share thing and get back into the presentation. Whoops. You guys have actually been looking at this demo slide and you didn't know it. So let's get on. We finished the demo. I want to share with you briefly some of the relevant to metadata, especially recommendations that the American Society for Indexing and the Indexes Working Group of the IDPF have been making. In other words, the whole notion of using the metadata that the index provides you, it's not going to work unless your indexes are linked. the little demo I just showed you only worked because the content had been linked. Whether it was to go back into the content, the lines, the headings in the index go with, or whether it's to allow you to go out elsewhere and purchase, it's got to be live. And the way to make that work is by adding unique IDs or making sure you've got unique ID schema within your content. Keep them simple, but you got to have them in there. And then you tag the metadata within the index entries, to those specific UIDs, or create a system of anchors in paragraphs or at other specific levels so that those links can work. Include them not only as, maybe traditional may not be the right word, but include them not only as back of the file chapters, but also consider including them up front where they will get searched first. Include them in your sample files. I love Amazon's Look Inside feature because you can look inside the index as well as other bits of content within the book. Unfortunately, the index is not always included as a sample file when you go to download an eBook edition, for example, which is really sad because it's very useful at that point, especially if you had one of these index mashups. You can really guide people to ways to other books and sales. Here's a little sort of summary of how it can work. You've got to have that index, that set of metadata accessible from every page. That find tool needs to incorporate and work with and reflect the index as well as full text search, or keep them separate and available to the reader to choose as a choice. Show results as snippets of text. Show the relevant specificity that the index gives you. Allow cross-references to also be revealed as a way to guide and converse with the reader as to what's available. The IDPF does have a use case for EPUB 3 as we're developing these specifications for indexes, and the implementation options are going to include a pop-up window for index terms as well as for locators. In other words, a reverse index. This one, I really like this one. The idea is that you're looking at some text, you're reading something, and you want to know what metadata has gone with it or how it's been codified. In other words, what's in the index that goes with this, a reverse index. So you would be able to click there, perhaps right-click and get an option window and see what from the index goes with that content. It can be a good guide to using the rest of the metadata as well. And then, of course, standalone index publications as well, much like the demo index that I showed you, that could contain links to other documents and other EPUBs as well. Ongoing work includes an extensive IDPF EPUB 3 use case, several implementation modes, and an EPUB 3 working group is now in place to define these. I can briefly go through some more specific recommendations, but Kat, I am getting a little worried about time unless there aren't too many questions. What do you think?
Yeah, Pilar, actually I don't see too many questions right now. We had a few, and it's pretty cool. A lot of the people in the chat room are actually answering the questions for people as we go, and a lot of them are about the resources that you've mentioned. So maybe when you wrap up, you can, I don't know, let people know where they can find you later if they do have questions.
Yeah, I've got a resource slide coming up. So let me just whip through some of these specific recommendations for how to use the index metadata. And these are from the EPUB 3 chapter-like indexes use case. The main thing I want to stress with regards to this set of recommendations is to remember that semantic metadata tells the user what kind of content they're looking at, how it's been coded, structured, and styled. And all of this is available, I should point out, via the American Society for Indexing, as well as after this webcast, to get into this very specific stuff of what's going to be coming in EPUB 3. one of the items here on screen that might be confusing people is the phrase decoration metadata. And what that refers to is what we may recall from traditional print indexes as little indications of the type of content. In other words, the way page numbers used to modify themselves to indicate which part of a book they were from, or if they went with a photograph or a figure or a table or a graph or maybe front matter, maybe they were in a Roman numeral where everything else was in Arabic numerals, stuff like that, those little visual clues. We don't want to lose those in the electronic medium as well. Also, the way I filter that one index, keep in mind you want to be able to filter your searches to certain types of metadata as well, whether it's certain types of decoration metadata or just certain types of index metadata. You've got a ton of data there, and there's lots of different ways to show it. This one does get a little bit techy, but it will be included in the EPUB 3 specifications. Not that you publishers would have to do all of these things, but this is the way to make that set of metadata useful as a navigational tool. And I don't want to get into all the specifics about that. Again, this will all be available. Some of it is already at the American Society for Indexing's website. And here's more about the reverse index. We've got some information dedicated just to that, and now I've got my resources slide. Here we go. Here's the website for the American Society for Indexing. The Digital Trends Task Force page in particular is where a preliminary version of this presentation, as I gave in Frankfurt, resides, as well as other resources with regards to the indexing work group and the IDPF. The EPUB 3.0 Indexes Working Group has their own set of pages as well. The original proposal that we put together detailing how to consider indexes as metadata is also available online. I do have a ton of other resources, so please feel free to email me at any time or via Twitter. There it all is.
Well, and I do actually, Pilar, there's one question from Jean-Christy Ashmore. Is there an estimate on when EPUB 3 is due? And I'm not sure in what context she means that. But
okay. I mean, parts of it are done already. And from what I understand, it's sort of an ongoing release. I don't know that there's a final deadline for all of it. It's, everybody wants to do it well. And I don't know that the indexes component has been finalized yet. But the information for that, we'd have to go to the IDPF to get that more specific information. I'm sorry, I don't have more specific.
No worries, and I do think the resources that you've given are a great place for people to go. So we appreciate that. And to let people know as well, I believe we will have the slides available, excuse me, online at the O'Reilly site as well if you want to go back and take a look at some of those great slides.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of content there with, you can get really technical about the specifications for how to use the index as a source of metadata with a digital book, but also just conceptually the ways the content of the index can be used to assist with search and discovery of your content.
Terrific. So we've got just about 2 minutes left, and I don't see any additional questions in the chat window, but I definitely want to let people know that you'll be expanding upon this in New York in February at TOC. Mm-hmm. And in addition, we have some other great speakers who are pretty well-versed on the topic, such as Laura Dawson, who's been in the chat window as well. So thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it. This was a wonderful, wonderful webcast from you, Pilar. Thanks for all the trouble you went to put it together.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome. It's been a little weird. I know you all are there, but I feel like I'm just talking into the air sometimes. But that's okay.
Yeah, and I think everyone's loving it. There's quite a bit of conversation going on around the topics you've brought up here in the chat window and also on Twitter. So definitely have people out there listening.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, that's the thing, is to get the word out, because, I mean, indexes are this wonderful source of information, and we just haven't been using them the way that I think our readers want us to. I know there was a lot of excitement down in Charleston when Jan Wright gave another version of this talk. The librarians were just so excited to see that we may well have indexes in a viable format with the electronic editions.
Yeah, it's quite the topic down here again this year, because I'm actually here right now. So I wanted to also let people know, Yaz did just mention in the chat room that these slides will be available. If you're attending the webcast right now, they're actually available right now. You just go to the Resources tab /widget, and you can download them. And she says that's the dark green widget with the file folder located in the widget tray. But I know that we also make all of these things available off of the O'Reilly site as well. And I think we're just at the top of the hour. So again, thank you so much, Pilar, and thank you, Yaz, for helping us do this today.
Absolutely. You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.
Great. And this is Yasmina, and on behalf of O'Reilly Media, yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Pilar, for an outstanding webcast. Kat, thank you for moderating today. Folks that attended, we greatly appreciate it and hope you benefited. Also want to let you know we did push out a little code to you all in your group chat. You can save some money today. TOC, with their last event, the New York 2012 video compilation, outstanding event with great footage there for you all. It's really something that you need to see. We do have a great code to save you 40% on that video. So we do encourage you to get it and check it out, and we hope you enjoy it. Again, thank you, Pilar. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, everyone. This will conclude our webcast. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.